Proud to partner with the Clinton Foundation and AT&T and through the generosity of the Kumpuris family to bring this lecture series to the community. Although we're not in person tonight, we're in for a special treat with our distinguished guest. Following the moderated conversation, Nate Thomas, Educational Programs Manager for the Clinton Foundation, will conclude the program. Our featured guest is Ursula M Burns, who in 2009 became CEO of Xerox, among the first Black women to be CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and the first woman to succeed another as head of a Fortune 500 company. Burns served as CEO of Xerox from 2009 to 2016 and was chairwoman of Xerox from 2010 to 2017. Among other civic positions, President Barack Obama appointed Burns to lead the White House National Program on Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math from 2009 to 2016. And she served as chair of the President's Export Council from 2015 to 2016, after service as vice chair from 2010 to 2015. She is the author of a new book titled Where You Are Is Not Who You Are, a memoir. To moderate the discussion, please welcome back to Arkansas the Honorable Colette D. Honorable, who previously served as commissioner at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission after being nominated by President Barack Obama in August 2014 and unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate for a term that expired in June 2017. She previously served as chairwoman of the Arkansas Public Service Commission. A partner at Reed Smith, she is a trusted advisor and counselor to 7 Fortune 500 energy companies, investor-owned utilities, renewable energy, and technology companies. Colette, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks so much, Susan. And seeing you all at the Clinton Center makes me miss home so much. I'm really delighted to be back with the Clinton Center for really this auspicious occasion. It's a treat. You are going to hear from a woman who is real in every sense of the word, Ursula Burns. It is really an honor and a delight to chat with you today with our friends watching.
Thank you, Colette. I love your name, the Honorable Miss Honorable.
Thank you.
I know you get that a lot.
I do. I married an honorable man, and then I've worked a lot in the public sector. So now I've switched over so I can raise my family. I know you relate to that.
Absolutely.
Tell us where you are today. Before we began live, you were telling us about how the weather is going in your part of the world, or the part of the nation.
Right, I'm at a section of Manhattan called Hudson Yards. I just started one of my crazy adventures, a private equity firm called Integrum, and I'm on the 47th floor of a building in Hudson Yards, which is our office. And today was a crazy day. I'm looking out the window. It's actually settled down a bit because the weather was just unbelievable. I mean, it started out great, hot. It's been really hot in the 90s or hundreds in the last 2 days. And of course, we had a front that came through, and it was just a barrage of rain and a ton of lightning. And when you're on the 47th floor of a building that's all glass, it's a little bit intimidating, but I'm still here. We're all still here. So thank goodness for that. Knock wood.
Amen to that. Well, we want to take your mind off of the weather for a little bit, Ursula, and thanks for in advance for entertaining my questions. I want to tell you how much I enjoyed reading your book, and I imagine I'm speaking for so many when they say that. And for those who haven't, I hope they will pick it up and read it. It was inspiring, it was educational, and it really made me think about how I work and, quite frankly, Ursula, how I live. So thank you for the way in which you have poured into all of us.
Thank you so much. I mean, let's get into the book because I want to make sure that I get across like the guts of the book, right?
Let's go right to it. I want to ask you, because in this book you speak about so many topics, about STEM, about women, about leadership, about the corporation's role today in the social context. Tell us, first of all, what inspired you to write the book.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time after I became a senior executive at Xerox. This was before I was CEO or chairman or even president. I was starting to move in circles that gave me access to lots of different people and voices of power and et cetera. And I was asked often to give speeches. You know, in the beginning, I hated the idea. But after my daughter told me that it was part of my responsibility, I kind of grabbed it. I speak at many college commencements, etc. And after these speeches, a lot of these speeches are talks, big groups, small groups, literally middle schoolers all the way up to corporate titans. People would come up to me and say, Ursula, you should write a book. My response was always that, you know, I can give a great speech, but I can't write a book. And I'm not that interested. One day, a couple of years later, you know, a couple of years before I started writing, I got an honorary doctorate from Howard University. And Vernon Jordan, who was, you know, probably my mentor, I call him almost like my father, was with me. And I was coming off the stage and all of the students were around. There's a lot of, you know, black and brown students, and it was just a great day. And they all come and said, "Oh, so you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book." And I kept saying, well, you know, nah, we won't do this. And we were walking away, and Vernon said to me, one other final student came up and said, are you going to write a book? I said, nah, I'm not going to write a book. Vernon turned around to me. I was a little bit behind him. He turned around and he said, write the goddamn book. And literally, that was when I decided, yeah, maybe I should do that. And I started the process. I have a good friend who was the chairman, the founder of Teneo. He's in the news a lot lately. A very good friend of mine, and he said, and I called him and said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about writing a book." And he put the wheels in motion and helped me find a publisher and the like. And then that was the journey. That was the start of a three-year journey. Yeah.
Well, we're grateful for the life of Vernon Jordan. Such a huge loss. My daughter is a rising junior at Howard, Ursula, and I got her your book. Speaking of your book, if you don't mind, you spoke so eloquently, or you wrote so eloquently in your book about your upbringing and about your mother and how hard she worked, and the fact that she raised you as a single mother, you and your siblings, and you lived in public housing. She worked so hard, you were never able to go on a vacation. We relate to that. I really love to give moms the credit they deserve, especially single mothers. And I want to ask, if you don't mind, to share a passage that was so poignant in your book. It's on page 56. And I want to tell the folks who are watching and who don't have the book, when you get it, you can read about it. If you don't mind sharing with us about your mother.
Yeah, and this was at the end of a discussion about leading a company and having the company at any time, good or bad, to go through massive changes, some of which results in people potentially losing their jobs. So there's a backdrop of this 50 pages before this section. It says, my decisions were informed by the example of my mother, a Panamanian immigrant on welfare. She must have constantly felt close to the edge, but never showed it, as she raised my brother, my sister, and me on her own. As a single mother, she made every penny count toward our survival on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. She took in washing and ironing jobs, bartered office cleaning for our medical needs, and took care of other people's children in our apartment to supplement her welfare check. Her unrelenting concern for us and her strict demands tailored our childhoods and instilled the foundation that would govern our futures. Her name was Olga Raquel Burns.
Thank you.
I did it without crying, which is a big deal.
I can't say the same because you're standing on her shoulders today. Yeah. And I'm moved by the fact that you're sitting right now tonight in this high rise in Manhattan. You have lived an incredible life, still yet to be lived, and still chapters yet to be written. And so it's so important to pay tribute to the women who aren't out front and who aren't read about in the way that you have. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
As a follow-up, you also said in the book that you attended an all-girls school, and we loved reading about the stories and how you and your siblings persevered. It told us a lot, Ursula, about who you were and that fortitude in you, that fight in you, that passion in you. But tell us also why it was beneficial to you in terms of the fact that there was no bias against women. How did that environment shape your future learning?
Yeah, there was so many things when I was going through my educational journey, particularly when I got to high school, where I went to an all-girl Catholic high school. I went to a mixed gender grade school, Catholic grade school. But when we got to 8th grade, 7th grade, we moved to the 8th grade and we went to high school. And I chose a school that was probably the best that I could choose, and the most that we can afford, called Cathedral High School. In Cathedral High School, all girls, most of the instructors, nuns. We had a couple of priests around and a couple of lay teachers, but most of the instructors were nuns. And this was in the 1970s, like 72-ish. And believe it or not, in 1972, people, I think you guys know, but some of the young people can't imagine, we didn't have handheld computers. We were just getting calculators. There was no internet in the form that we knew it. So most things were literally the olden days, right? There was 3 or 4 channels on TV. It was not anything like it is today. You go to this school, and one of the things that was amazing to me and important to me, I didn't know it then, was the strict discipline that this school and all my 12 years in parochial school instilled. There were very few places that you could go and avoid the watching eyes of the nuns, and the in some situations kind of brutal defense of rule that they had. They literally could at that time hit you, which they often did, with rulers, have you stand in corners, put gum in your hair if you were out of bounds, etc. And this taught, it sounds terrible, right? But it really wasn't. It's not appropriate. It was not necessarily appropriate, but it fit my needs perfectly. So I literally learned when to fight, when to open up your mouth, what was worth pursuing and what wasn't, and just how to kind of play the game. My sister and my brother didn't. My sister got kicked out of school. My brother got kicked out of school because they basically rebelled very outwardly against this form of discipline, in some ways, racism, etc. So that was one. The second thing it taught me was how to study and work hard. Basic study habits, how to read for comprehension, how to do all of your homework, how to write legibly, literally all these things that are, you say, of course everybody learns that, but not the way that we did, not the way that I did. So I was able to take that education that didn't have a lot of depth by that time in math or science. It had the basic courses, the most basic courses. I think we got to advanced algebra. That was as far as we got in high school, and that was a special class. But I parlayed all of that, and a lot of us at that time who went to schools like this, and were able to take standardized tests and perform probably better than your learning had propelled you. So I took the standardized test, and the rest, as I say, is history. But it was perfect. The last piece was that we only had women. We only had girls in the school when I was in high school. All of the drama, and we wore uniforms. All of the drama, and we couldn't wear makeup. So think about this. All of the drama that goes with, girls transitioning to women and competing against each other on things like dress and lips. Literally, I'd say 90% of it was absolutely gone. So what we had just basically plainly dressed girls who basically came to school every day, and we debated about a lot of things, but it wasn't about boys. It wasn't about what we were wearing, and it wasn't about the makeup that we had. So it was an interesting learning experience for me, and exactly what I needed when I was growing up.
It seems like also pure in the sense of stripping away a lot of the things that I think distract us as women today, quite frankly, the things that you've mentioned. I want to stay on this point where you were talking about STEM, about math and science, because in your book you talk so much about it. And you came to the role as CEO having been an engineer. I want to know first what prompted you to pursue engineering, and also how did the rigor of your training and your experience in your day-to-day work impact your role as a leader of a Fortune 500 company?
Yeah, I will. Let me start with the latter first, and that's I fell into engineering luckily. So I say this by accident, and there's a peril in that, and a lesson to be learned from that about educational systems around the world, but particularly in the United States. But fortunately, I came to that place because it kind of fit my sentiments, fit kind of who I was. I like order.
Mm-hmm.
I like beginnings and ends. I don't like these like forever, problems. I like getting to level one and then improving it as we go on. This is kind of the nature of who I was. And engineering, luckily, aligned with all of those things. It aligned with math and science, which generally has, particularly the math part, definitive answers.
Mm-hmm.
It aligns with engineering is all about, let's see if it can work first and then we'll perfect it later. And this is all kind of what I like to do, even in my personal life. I led my company and did every job that I have ever done, including the jobs after 10 years in the company where I was no longer an engineer, from this problem solving, understanding the process, looking at it and trying to perfect it point of view. That's how I literally led. That's how I still interact and manage even my house today. Let's look at it, make sure it's visually organized, make sure you can understand the key pieces that drive change and see if those pieces are working well. So it's kind of this engineering mentality.
Yes.
And I led and I live through an engineer's eye and brain. I got there because by luck, by pure luck.
Mm-hmm.
And it should not be the course that you choose your careers via. You should have a little bit more planning. I went to a school, as I told you, that didn't have a lot of math and science depth. They had great education, had great discipline, but they went up to like a certain level. I didn't take a physics class until I got to college. I took an algebra. Now the school, by the way, is phenomenal. Advanced math, all of the courses that you can imagine, still all girls, still doing very well. I'm a massive supporter because it is just an amazing place. But I go there and I took a test like everybody had to at that time. It's called a pre-SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, PSATs. Yes. I took it, as you should, in junior year, and and quote unquote, I did extremely well in the math portion of the PSATs. And basically what I learned later is that I did extremely well for my school, but I was literally below average for the average, but you didn't have to know that. I was feeling pretty good about myself. Like, okay, good, you're good at math. And so I had every couple of weeks, we had access to a guidance counselor in my high school when you were a junior and a senior, because we didn't have guidance counselors. That were able to guide into the outside world. It was mostly none. So we had a lay person came in and told us about career options, etc. And I was, had the person come in and look at my, and go, oh my goodness, you did really good and well in math. You should be an actuary. Before this, by the way, when I was in grade school, they told me, and at the beginning of high school, they said you could do 3 things with these scores, with this performance that you have. You could be a nun, you could be a teacher, or you could be a nurse. And two of them were possible. One was out of the question. The nun piece would never have worked. The nurse piece didn't quite work because I didn't like all of the stuff that goes, with the nurse, the blood and stuff like that. Yeah. And the teacher, I was pretty intrigued. Okay, I kept looking. I got this thing about an actuary. I go to the library, and there's this, because this was before the internet, so you couldn't look it up there. I didn't know anything about what.
Of course, and no one around you probably knew what an actuary was.
Make sure you understand, no one around me knew what you could do with good scores in SATs.
Right.
Nobody. All they knew around me was that was a good thing. Go find out what you could do. So anyway, I go to the library, I look in the Barron's book, look up what an actuary is, realize I'm not going to do this at all. Look up teachers and schools that taught it, and luckily found a section about the highest paid jobs that you can do after 4 years of college. That was my entire screen, was the highest paid jobs you can have after 4 years of college. I wanted my mother to have a better life.
Amen.
College was not an option or a question. My mother was clear that we were going to go to college. How she was going to pay for it was totally, I had no idea. And she would always tell me, don't worry about that.
That's
You
right.
worry about what you worry about, I worry about what I worry about. And I looked, and the highest paid job after 4 years of college in 1972 was chemical engineer. And I said, that's it. I'm going to become a chemical engineer.
Simple as that.
That was it. I'm going to be a chemical engineer. And then I looked at the book. There's another section about the most competitive colleges in the world, in the United States, and Yale and Harvard and MIT and all these other schools. I remember the academies were on there, the military academies were on there. I said, okay, good. So I'm going to take this really great score that I got in math, and I'm going to become a chemical engineer, and I'm going to go to these schools. By the way, this was a totally illogical set of things that I had laid out because I didn't have enough money to go to
Right.
schools. I didn't have any idea what the heck a chemical engineer did, et cetera, et cetera. But I applied.
You didn't know where your score actually fit among the folks.
Now I did. By this time in the book, I knew I was in a little bit of trouble, but because the scores in the book to get into the highly competitive were essentially perfects, 1500s of the 1600. And I may have had in the PSAT, and that's an 800 in math. I had probably a 450 to 500 in math. 500.
Wow.
And realized, oh, well, this is a problem, but I figured that's not too big a problem. They told me I could do it, so I might as well try. Long story short, I applied to all of these colleges, got into a whole bunch of them, all on the back of a program called HEOP, the Higher Education Opportunity Program. It's a state of New York program that took promising students that were not totally prepared and sent them to colleges all over, and they provided them with tutoring, a stipend because everybody in HEOP was poor, so you couldn't get to and from the school, a stipend for whatever you needed, and bought your books and gave you a counselor. And I was unbelievably fortunate that we fell into HEOP. My brother and I both went to college on HEOP scholarships. In the first semester, I was a disaster. I passed every program, like every course, like English and the like. Chemistry, I hated it. It was horrible. And I realized I'm in trouble because a chemical engineer has to do, if there's one thing they have to do is chemistry. I was horrible at it. It reminded me of cooking, precise measurements. Not good for me. And so I basically went to my counselor and said, I gotta leave. Flunk out, I gotta leave. I wasn't even failing the class, by the way, but I just didn't like it. And she said, what are you talking about? You've taken the basic of everything. You haven't even gotten into your major. You don't like chemistry? Let's look at what you like. And I told her what I liked. I liked math. I liked some of the advanced, the differential equation classes that I was taking at that time. She said, why don't you become a mechanical engineer? I said, sure. Literally, this is how sure, I'll try that. And the rest, as they say, is history. This was like, this counselor saved my butt because I literally loved it. I love mechanical engineering. I love the mechanics side of it, the fluid dynamics and thermodynamics side of it. I had a ball as a chemical engineer. And after one semester, I was not being tutored anymore. I was tutoring. I literally blossomed around this set of classes and this theory of learning that it basically changed my life. And it changed my life for the good in that it gave me a chance to fail safely, right? Like I said, I just moved from one thing to another thing with no skin off my back, nothing lost. And it was just perfect.
And someone was there to say, just a moment now, before you dial yourself out of this. That's phenomenal. I thank you for sharing that because you're speaking to young people today. You're speaking to parents like me of kids. So I hope you'll keep sharing your story. In your book, and you spoke about that program too in your book. So I wanted to mention that for the folks who are watching because they can read about it. And I'm sure there are many programs like that can help students find who they are and their potential. So thank you for that. It was lost on me that's a different way of spelling hope, which you
Interesting.
To
Interesting. I never thought about it that way. You're so right, right?
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
I'm a mere lawyer, Madam Engineer. But I want to ask you something. In your book, I really was so taken with the way you talked about, you really disdained being thought about as being successful because you were exceptional. I hear this word unicorn being used a lot. I'm sure you've been called that before. Tell us why you hate that so much, and how you see yourself, because I think it's really humbling, quite frankly.
Right. It took me a while. You know, in the beginning, when people told me, "Oh my God, you are amazing. You're so smart. You're literally." I heard it all the time, but it always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was always doubtful and disdainful of these words. Even after I became CEO, it was like, look at it, Ursula, look, you're so articulate, you're so genuine, you're so amazing. And it finally clicked one day what I did not like about it. That was, and the way that I'll tell you how it crystallized in my head. The people who were telling me this were largely white male people in business, right? White male leaders. And I came to realize that they called me superior, a unicorn, so that they could justify having me in the room. And this may sound horrible, and I'm sure that a lot of them didn't necessarily in the front of their mind think this way. But I went to school like they went to school, had good grades like they had good grades. I went through the vast majority of jobs possible to do in my company at the varying levels that they did. I was on teams and XYZs like they were. And they didn't call themselves superior, or they were part of the team. The only way that I could be allowed to be in that space with them and not have them wonder why there were not more people like me in the space was to call me absolutely, positively superior, amazing. So it justified my being in the room in their minds. The only way somebody like me could be with them is if somebody like me was absolutely outstanding, if somebody like me was absolutely superior. And I came to the conclusion that because I know a lot of the people who I grew up with. I know my mother, I know my brother and I know these people, and there is nothing superior in my character or even in most of my learnings than a lot of the people I know. I just had different choices, different chances.
Yeah.
I had a lot of luck and I had different support. So if we open this up to all the people who look like me, if we open up access to the resources that are out there, to more people who look like me, guess how many people, there would be significantly more people in the rooms that I was in with them than there are today, which was basically one. And so I just thought, it finally clicked that this was not about me, it was more about them. It was not about praise to me, it was justification to them about how come there's so few of me in the room, because I am not that spectacular.
So I'll disagree with that last part, but let's go with that. And justify their acceptance of you. What made you different? And I relate to that so much, Ursula. You speak so, whatever the word is, That's how we should speak. That's how your mother, Miss Olga, if I might say, that's how she raised you to speak.
Right.
So there's nothing nothing unusual or extraordinary about that.
There's an image about us. There's an image that when you see it portrayed on television all the time. And when I was growing up, that's the only way we were portrayed on TV. These are people who have a completely different approach to life. We dress a completely different way. We don't value education. We want a quick, but all these things, these negative stereotypes that are kind of just flooded. They know a lot of people who are not like that, but they don't know a lot of people who are like them, if you know what I mean. But so there's this whole thing about, well, you have to be amazing. You have to be amazing, because if you were not amazing, then there would be more people like you in the room. And I can't justify why there are not more people like you in the room, except for to say you're the best thing that ever happened.
And you know that there are many people. I often say there, but by grace we all go. There were many people who, if they had an opportunity, made a better choice once in their life. Had the people like your counselor who said, just a minute now, or saw something in you didn't see. That's what I loved about the chapter in your book on mentors and models. So thank you so much.
I had the best. I had I don't know, luck again. Preparer for sure, but a lot of people prepared luck. I had the best that you could possibly ever have of mentors, friends, supporters. It's literally like you look at the list and you go, how in the hell did that happen? Vernon Jordan, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Ken Chenault, Ken Fraser. How the heck did that happen? My mother, my husband, who was absolutely amazing, scientist, just brilliant minds. All of these people sprinkling around, people who are not that famous. My sister, who have no fame and fortune in them, that were just amazing gap fillers when I had these major gaps in my life, major gap fillers for me, and made it possible for me to end up at a place when there was a choice to be made, I was prepared to make the right choice, and I was smart enough to kind of know I was prepared and kind of dive in. It's an amazing blessing that I've had in my whole life, and most of the book is about that those people who kind of came in and built me up, and I stand on their shoulders. I spent a lot of time on Vernon. I spent a lot of time on my husband, a tremendous amount of time on my mother. But these people had no reason. My mother, of course, did, but these people had no reason to care for me specifically, but they did. These programs like HEOP, these are all things that I was very afraid after the last 4 years of the last administration, that a lot of this was being dismantled, and a lot of it is. So it's being dismantled, and it gives 1, 2, 3, 100, 1,000 people who have less hope. It gives them hope. It gives them more hope. It's a hard thing to see happening in the country, but
it is. And we were speaking today about that feeling of despair and lack of hope in our nation, and how important it is that every person feel that, so that they can see themselves in how you've lived your life. I know you don't want to receive that, but that, to me, it's very inspiring and motivating. I want to ask you, Ursula, you were going to say something.
No, yeah, I actually don't get me wrong. I'm not in anywhere near stupid enough or insightful enough to know that I have had a spectacular life.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and that I have achieved more than even, a really well-positioned white guy would achieve. So I get that. But I just don't want people to believe that was because I had greater intellect.
Understood.
Or worked harder. No, nobody could work harder than my mother. So I just want to make sure we separate the wheat from the chaff, right? From the chaff.
Yes.
It's not about Ursula, you just happen to run faster than everybody else in the race. Ursula, you happen to stay up more, work. No, it's some of that. I ran fast and I worked hard. I also had support. Yes. I was lucky, fortunate. Timing was right. I had an unbelievably strong and amazing foundation. But this is not about, I'm not stupid enough to believe that I'm not great. I'm not in a great place, but I'm also not silly enough to believe that this is all me. This is not all about me. This was not all me. It was help. It was me plus help, plus a whole bunch of help that just kept throwing me up in the air. If you would have seen some of the absolutely crazy things that I would have attempted to do and done, but fortunately I always had people who kept me right off the edge, grabbed me from the edge and said, no, don't do that. And it kind of all worked out in the end. I am doing well, but it's not because I am the smartest cookie in the bowl of cookies or the hardest worker in the bowl of cookies. I work hard. I am smart, but I also had help.
We received that. I want to stay in this place where you spoke about being in the room. You were many times the only woman in the room, many times the only Black woman in the room, will you speak to those women? What kept you pursuing, questioning, challenging, striving for you to get to that corner, that office, kitty corner to the CEO office, such that you could just move your things right across? What was it in you? I think part of it is all the things you've mentioned before, your family, that amazing kitchen cabinet you've talked about. What else was it for you as a Black woman?
You know, I grew up in an environment where we were the majority. Poor, Black, generally women leaders in our neighborhoods. There were small little neighborhoods that were, no kingdoms whatsoever, or even queendoms. But I was surrounded by strong women. There's no doubt about it. Even in the street, I remember in the book I say that, I would go to school and come back, and if I did something wrong on the way, we probably had 16 people who could beat the heck out of me and explain to me what I was doing wrong. And then when I got home, they would tell my mother and I would get beat again. And I was surrounded by women who you saw them carrying a lot of weight on their back. That's one.
Yes.
My mother told me that's one reason. The other thing is that I learned early, because I tried all of the things that you normally try, to kind of look like them, to act like them, to get your hair done like, we did it all. And I realized that I never did any better. The best I ever did was when I was Ursula, Maxine, literally. And that's the second. And then third, I'm relatively smart, and I'm definitely well-read. And I became absolutely disdainful to me trying to fit in all the time. I got tired of it, sick and tired of it. And basically decided that I was just going to be who I was. And at the end of the day, it worked. It worked. I got trained to be everything you could imagine, to dress a different way, to speak a different way, you name it. To answer questions a different way. People, I'm coming up the company ladder and they would ask me a question, and there's a way that you can answer it that doesn't answer the question. And I literally could never figure out a way to do this without feeling like a fool, right?
And an imposter. You weren't authentic.
So I basically was fortunate enough to have some examples of, and some early experiences when I opened my mouth. This is why I say this in the book. I went to the perfect company. Unbelievable. The perfect company. I think in any other company, I would have been fired 20 times over. I go to this company, they hired me because I was me, a Black woman. They didn't hire me because they wanted a white man engineer. They wanted this Black woman engineer. And fortunately, it kind of all came together at the right time, where I was encouraged to open my mouth. I had already learned how to do it, but you can be beat up into submission, right? Beat into submission if you don't. But I went to a company that was like, wow, they wanted to hear. And I would actually say things, and I wasn't demoted or fired. Actually, I was given more work. Do this. Could you do this? Could you do this? I always said yes to everything. So I think that the way that I got comfortable is that I was encouraged in this flywheel effect, right? Or I was not discouraged in this flywheel effect. And I just became more and more comfortable with doing it, to the point where after a while there was no way for me to go back. I tried occasionally, because it would have been easier to just shut up and fit in, to not, to just kind of make it easier. But I didn't, because it was more fun being the way I was, which I later found out was who I was.
That's right.
It was more fun doing that than it was kind of just falling in line, just being like everybody else and falling in line.
That's a great testimony to women who are challenged in the workplace every day.
Let me say something here, because everyone has a personality, and not every one of them is like mine. Clearly, I'm not the only way. Look, you're unbelievably successful as well. We can keep going, right? So different methods, different people. But find your method. I say this a lot. It's really important that if what you're doing to earn a living is selling your soul every single day, find another job. It sounds horrible to say, particularly by me. People are like, oh, sure, you can say that because now you're rich and famous. And I tell you what, I live this way.
Yes.
If what you're doing is literally pretending to be something else, then what you really are, first of all, it's hard work.
Yes.
Right? It's hard work to do. It's mentally and emotionally draining. Find something that you're passionate about, that you're passionate about, not somebody else told you to be passionate about, and that you do it in a way that's respectful,
Yes.
honorable, as inclusive as possible, making sure that you don't think you're always right, but you can't actually do it the way that somebody else does it if it's not you. And if you have to do that, I say this to my kids all the time. I say to them, listen, you have to earn a life. Right? I will make so that you have enough money to not have to earn a living. Because what we had to do when I was growing up was, we had no choice. Shoot.
You had to earn a living.
You have to earn a living.
That's right.
I want us to try to, when you get to a point, you have to keep enough of your soul, of yourself, so that you can keep this life going, and in addition to this living going. Anyway, it's hard to articulate more, and that's probably going to be my second book about how do you hold on to the stuff that makes you you. I remember I had an executive talk to me, a good friend, ended up being a good friend, and he was trying hard to be a good friend, and he was fine. We were on some CEO thing. There was all these things that CEOs did together. And he said, speaking to this audience, it was in a relatively casual place. He says, I am colorblind, and he went on to say what was going on. And I raised my hand and said to him, I won't say the name, I said, how dare you be colorblind? That's an interesting thing. I said, if you are colorblind, you take away from a huge amount of what makes Ursula.
Yes.
For you to, I'm not colorblind. When I see a person, I look at them and say, oh, this is a white, Asian. So there's a whole bunch of perspectives. Now, I have to learn more about that individual.
Yes.
But for you to actually ignore the fact, for you to deal with me by ignoring the fact that I am actually who I am, the core of who I am, is very nerve-wracking to me. And that's what happened for a long time, right? We had diversity, but we didn't have inclusion.
That's right.
This whole thing about inclusion, it's not called diversity, equity, and conformity.
That's right.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. And it's a really important thing that we start to not get so hung up on. We're all hung up on race, but that can't be the thing that we base every single conversation that we have on to start, from start to finish.
That's right. I hope you will write that second book. I'm pounding on my desk right now because we need to talk about that. How can you look at me and not see that I'm a woman and appreciate my lived experience and what I bring to the table that's different?
You don't even have to like it or agree. Just as long as that we're different, but we have different experiences. We understand the difference. We don't look at women and say, oh my God, I don't see a woman there. You look at some woman, you see a woman there. But we see a black person, it's like, oh no, I don't want to look at that. We see an Asian, I don't want to look at that. I just see a person in front of me. No, you see a black person in front of you. You see a Hispanic person in front of you. You see a Chinese person in front of you. By the way, when you start acting on ignorance towards that person, then that's when I call you a racist. Otherwise, I call you aware. You're an aware human being, right?
And something to me, and I want to touch on this in a moment, that came out during the pandemic was this heightened sense of awareness about the importance of racial equity and the role we must play, not the role we can play, but the role we must play to bring that about. And it just occurred to me as you were speaking that we seem to be in a place in maybe globally, but particularly in the US, where we want to move in that direction. So I really do hope in that second book, Ursula, you will help us, particularly in the corporate world, get to that place or closer to that place. Even for you and I, we're both Black women. We have different experiences. I told you we have some things in common, but your lived experience is very different from mine. And so we have to continue to educate ourselves as we work to do better by one another. So I want to encourage you there. I want to congratulate you, Ursula, because I see your title on the screen says senior advisor of Teneo. But just this week, and this is breaking news for us here in this session tonight, you were named chairwoman. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. A great firm.
Yeah, great.
Great firm. They do great work. I got engaged with Teneo, my God, many years ago as a client when I was the CEO of Xerox, and then when I was the CEO of VEON, telecommunications company, in a European telecommunications company. Both great jobs. And I used Teneo as a CEO advisor during some very sticky times. Retired from that job, the VEON job, after retiring from the Xerox job, and became a senior advisor to this firm called Teneo. And basically, senior advisor was helping them help other CEOs and business leaders in advancing their business strategy, whatever it was. Pretty cool role. And then a couple of weeks ago, we started to run into a pretty big snag when the founder of the firm and one of the co-founders of the firm had a personal issue that he had to deal with. I mean, it was a negative individual incident that he had, and he has to deal with that. What I saw happening was that the firm was totally and completely wrapped up into that, right? So, and its reputation was being dragged through the mud. The executive had to separate himself from the company, chose to do that for the better of the firm. And I was asked and realized that it was important that I come in to not run the firm. They have a president there who's one of the founders and a CEO, whatever the heck, but there needed to be a comforting established executive. I don't mean comforting like everybody feel better. No, comforting in that.
I don't get that from you one bit, by the way.
That's right. It was in, let's talk about what we do really well. Let's talk, this is an opportunity. Right now we're in the middle of a storm that we didn't create. The firm did not create this. The firm had nothing to do with it whatsoever, but the firm is dragged to the thing. Most of the people in the firm are stunned. Like, I don't even know what happened, but we could have lost it if it weren't helped along, and it had done such great work for me, and I knew people in it a lot. I was an advisor to it. That it was important for me to step in and do what I could do to help it. It's a great place, by the way. It will continue to be a great place. And I'll just one side note: the individual who did have this personal problem, I got into this big debate about this with someone. This is a guy who I've known for a long time. I wasn't where he was when this all happened. And people kept asking me, "Are you going to stand by him?" I said, I'm confused on your question. What is it that you mean? This is a friend of mine. I have no perfect friends. No perfect friends. There are certain things that you can do that really will put you in the doghouse, sometimes permanently. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I will absolutely support this friend and help him, see if I can help him through this, however that is. It's not the kind of behavior that, you don't run for the hills. And a lot of it is self-reputation. I don't want my reputation sullied. I was, wow, this is an interesting thing. Imagine the number of things that I could have done wrong in my life, and some of them I have, but I just didn't get caught. My goodness, I hope my friends stick with me longer than some of these people talk about sticking with.
Amen. These days, isn't that the truth?
I tell you.
Thank you for sharing your recent transition, and I know they're grateful that you're there to help keep the ship on course and to keep everybody focused.
Yeah, that's basically, you hit it right on your perfect descriptor of my thing. Ship is on a good course. Let's keep it on course. And can we start focusing on our team members and our clients? News media and all this other stuff about the salacious this or that. I understand that person has to deal with it, but this firm is about its clients and its employees, its team members.
We got a job to do. Let's do it.
Got a job to do.
So I want to tell you, I read this wonderful piece, Q&A, Ursula, that you did with Harvard Business Review, and you spoke about, I think the author asked you about the corporate world and how it's changed. You've weathered some storms, my goodness. You're back for more. You just talked about that. And I'm sure they're grateful that you said yes. But talk to us about how this corporate world is evolving. It seems, and I've mentioned to you, I'm an independent director of a Fortune 200 company. The challenges are bigger and greater the stakes are higher every day. And so tell us how and what advice, how did you get through that, looking back at the moment you're in the middle of the storm, looking back, how you got through it, and what advice you would give to corporate leaders today who are really taking on such dynamic and evolving challenges?
Right. When I was the CEO, I was in an environment, it was starting to change at the end of my term in the first, when I was with Xerox. It was an environment, we had one holy master, and you had one set of metrics. The holy master was called the shareholder.
Yes.
The metrics were all financial, right? Growth, profitability, cash generation, that was it. You had to answer sometimes to other things, but it was 100% clear that if you met those numbers every 3 months and met them well at the end of the year, you could weather just about any storm, no problem. What has happened in the last 5 years, 6 years, 5 years maybe, is that what has come to the forefront is that is not enough.
Yes.
That's not enough.
Yes.
And CEOs now have to be citizens of the world. They have to be not citizens that just pay taxes. They have to be citizens that don't waste. They have to be citizens that include. They have to be citizens that have points of view about what democracy means, what capitalism means, etc. You have to be citizens that stand for the fundamental structure of the countries the country that we're in. I'm talking about the United States now.
Yes, yes.
And before it was you just stay quiet on all that stuff. By the way, it was discouraged. Don't say anything about any of that stuff. You just kind of just do your 3 things: grow your revenue, increase your cash, and make sure you have a strong balance sheet, and then make sure your profitability grows, which is related to the balance sheet and the cash. And nowadays they ask you questions like, what do you think about immigration?
Yes.
What do you think about the woman's right to have complete control over their bodies? What do you think about, let's keep going, right? What do you think about?
What do you think about ensuring voting rights or restricting?
Absolutely, restricting voting rights. What do you think about policing?
Yes.
What do you think about racism? What do you think about sexism?
Yes.
And so the problem with this is that you have to define clearly what do you think, right? And is the you, or is the you the company, or where does that stand? I don't know the answers to all of that, and a lot depends on the industry you're in, a lot depends on, I had a very clear point of view always about everything, sometimes very dangerous. Sometimes I would say, not for you to know, none of your business what I think about it. I can tell you what my company's going to do. We're going to support the XYZ. It's the right, everybody has the right to vote. We're going to support. Right now, people didn't even have to answer the question before. Now you cannot avoid answering the question. And it's a harder thing to do than just making money. As I would say all the time before all of this, my daughter could make a profit number in a quarter. You gave her a number, she may destroy the company in the process. No, don't invest in the future, don't pay the, so on and so on, but she can make a number. It's a lot harder to do it in a sustainable, balanced, giving, responsible way. And that's what's happening with business leaders today. Fortunately, so getting back to the initial question, number one, where's your team? Mm-hmm. Let's sit them around you and see who are these guys and you together fit for purpose. When you guys come together, do you make, I always say this in a lot of different environments, do you make the perfect human? Mm-hmm. Right? Because your team should be, and I mean the perfect human, heart, head, brain. You put the team together with the skill sets and the covering the gaps that you come out with an answer that is at least looking at the many, many bases and places that you have to look. So first is your team. You have to be able to do that. And I say this, second, I got this from one of my many mentors. My responsibility, and I did this probably pretty well, was that you have to be able to define reality for your company. What the heck is going on really? Not the stuff that we write down, my vision, my values, and then give hope, right? What hope is, so here's where we are, here's where we want to be. Sometimes you're in a great place and you just want to be in a better place or a different great place. So this is the reality, and here is the hope, clear of where we want to be. And then you and your team and your team broadly, the 10,000, 100,000 people work for you. That's the work you do. That's what the job is. That's what's called the job, getting from here to here. But
Yes.
before you can get from here to here, you have to actually explain that in human terms. You have to show that in examples if you have them, et cetera, et cetera. And you have to, the last I always say in the book is, I always said, people always say to me, Ursula, don't ever let them see you sweat. I was a firm believer that people had to know that I did not know everything.
That's right.
I mean, particularly my team. So when I saw silence or non-contribution, that was worse to me than having the wrong answer. At least it was an attempt to get to an answer. This idea that you could sit back and not engage is something that always, my fuse would go off. I'm like, I'm not sitting here. I can't be the only one who is stressing about this. Are we not all stressing about it? If we're all stressing about it, we work on it.
Yeah. Well, I want to end with this, just one question, because we've talked about the pandemic, we've talked about social change, you've talked about the work that has to be done day to day in a corporation. Talk about, too, this role that a corporation can play in driving that kind of change, which is so desperately needed in our nation and around the world.
It is, and it's always been very confusing to me to hear that corporations' responsibility was, and they would say, not this.
Yeah.
It's not about sustainability, not about violence. It's not about, that's somebody else. It's not about fiscal policy that drives whatever. It's not about, if it's not us, who are also citizens, right? And probably have the biggest, who is it?
Yes.
I still don't get it, right? They say, well, it's the elected officials. I said, they have a piece to do with it. They obviously do, but the last time I looked, they don't run any companies. They don't employ any people.
Right.
Right? So if it's not you to get engaged, us, corporations, business leaders who have been selected by shareholders to represent 800,000, 1 million people, whatever the hell it is, Walmart, 1 million people, companies, me, 100,000 people when I was, who is it? When I talk about trade, when I talk about immigration, when I talk about healthcare and healthcare policies, this is when I talk about policing and the neighborhoods that my workers have to actually work in and come from their homes to. This is all stuff that I better be interested in. Or else, by the way, I say shut up and just take what you get as an answer. It is our responsibility to have a piece of this voice. It's very, very tenuous exactly how you do it. But just because I can't tell every single person how to do it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Part of your job, it's kind of like saying, I don't know how to make money in whatever, pick a country, right? Then I say, if you don't know how to make money, get the hell out of the country, right? You can't keep telling me, I just don't know, I'm not going to get in God, I just don't know how. You better figure out a way to be a citizen of this country, a citizen of the world, be a business leader, and have a voice that's appropriate. But I don't want you to tell me, like I said, it's not about what I think. People say to me, what do you think? I remember this unbelievable thing. What do you think about abortion and abortion rights? I said, the last time I looked at this, the right to have an abortion, it's legal in the United States, right? It exists. So this is what I feel. Every woman who is in the United States, it's legal, has the right to have one. Period. Do I believe in it? I'll turn off the Ursula Burns, the CEO thing, and I'll put on the Ursula Burns, biker jacket cover and say, here's what I think personally. But that's not, my personal thing is not of interest to this discussion right now.
Right.
Right? Voting rights. What do you think about this push against? I said, just think about this. I don't care what you say. We are in the United States of America. We fought many, 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 many battles, some of them physical, for people to have the right to vote. And we actually have people, citizens in this country, under assault. My question is, as a business leader, how in the world can you stay silent? This is not about let's make it harder or easier for this kind of person or that kind of person. We are in this thing that's called the United States of America. This is not the United States of Cuba. It's not the United States of anywhere else. We are here. This is the way that this country has formed and has flourished over years. And it is not reasonable for us to make visual, value-based discussions about something that's a tenet of our country. And right now we have people saying, I don't want to talk about it. It's not for me to worry about. Fortunately, a lot of the business leaders are now starting to realize that that's not sustainable. That voice is not sustainable. And let me close with one other piece here on this. It's not about me. I say this all the time. You know, the great news about me is that I do what I think everybody should do. If the business leader is not willing, your company is not willing to stand for things that you agree with, or that are fundamental to America, or fundamental to whatever the heck it is, everybody should have an education, whatever, then there are three constituents that actually have a really amazing vote. One are the employees. You work in the place. Please pick up your voice. Second are your customers. What the heck? I buy all of this stuff. We have no women on the boards of companies that make bras. I say this all the time. They make bras. They've never had to wear, the entire leadership is male. You should say, there's a point where this is a little bit ridiculous. That's an example. And the first is your employees, the second is your customers, and the third is your shareholder. Absolutely. Shareholders now get together and say, I don't like this approach. I don't like the fact that you're not being more inclusive. I don't like the fact that you're not diverse. I don't like the fact that you're polluting. I'm going to move my money from your company and invest in another company. And these three constituents have nothing to do with me personally. They have to do with you as individuals. And if we don't want to do it, then you take what you get. If you don't want to vote with your feet, pension funds, big investment funds, you have a voice here. You can drive companies' behavior to a true and fair democracy, and that's what we're trying to do. For example, you can do that by literally saying, I don't agree, and we're starting to see it more and more.
I wish we had more time. I love, Ursula, that you channeled the late Congressman John Lewis in your last comment. I want to remind everyone, Ursula Burns' book is Where You Are, Not Who You Are. And thank you so much. It has been a lot of fun tonight, and I want to turn it over to Nate Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you both for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here tonight. The conversation was equally intriguing and inspirational. I know I have a lot to think about and a book to reread. Mm-hmm. Thank you to our moderator, the Honorable Colette Honorable, for keeping us on track tonight. And of course, a very special thank you to our guest, Ursula Burns. We appreciate your time, but moreover, we are grateful that you have chosen to share your story so that many others can follow in your footsteps. And thank you to our audience for joining us. The Kumpuris Distinguished Lecture Series presented by the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton School of Public Service, and AT&T. We hope to see you at the Clinton Center very soon.